What is the nicest thing you've ever done that no one knows about? When I lived in the city, an older lady about 90 got her app robbed in my building. They went and stole all her cash and took some valuables that she had. She did not have a bank account, so the thieves took about 30k, the lady's life savings. She was afraid of being evicted for the app because she wouldn't have the rent money and did not want to end up in a state-run nursing home. I called the landlord and paid her rent in full for the rest of the year, 5 months worth, and told the landlord not to tell her it was me. I also had groceries delivered to her once a week for the next 2 months until she had some money saved from her social security checks. I never told anyone what I had done for her, and I don't think she even knew my name because the apt building had about 50 apartments in it. The landlord was the only one who knew, and he wanted to tell her what I was doing, but I told him that I would deny it. I did not want her to feel indebted to me. She posted a letter in the lobby of the building to thank whoever had helped her. I took the letter down and kept it. The landlord still writes to me every few months to tell me how she is doing. She is still living in the apt 7 years later. I never told anyone. This made me cry. A lot of people forget about the elderly because they don't have much time left. Thank you for being so wonderful. I was in a hurry and stopped at a gas station to fill up. While I was outside my car, a man came up to me and asked if I could spare $1 or $2 for gas. He, his wife, and his daughter were traveling but were broke and barely made it to the station. They had a broken down old Volvo, and it was clear that they were vagabonds of some sort who lived in their car. The kid was at most 2 years old. I was pretty low on cash myself, but I thought, hey, what the heck? I could use some affirmation that people can be kind if I were in their situation. So I swiped my card at their pump and said, fill it up. Good luck to you and your family. I hope this can get you where you're going, and walked away. He started crying as I left, and I would have lost it too if I wasn't too proud to do so in public. But to see a grown man cry like that, both for having received an unexpected gift and for having to be put in the position of begging to keep his family safe, was one of the most profound experiences of my life. I haven't told anyone until now. Mad Max. Gas. Dang, that should have been expensive. Well, it's not me personally, but my great uncle was a quiet guy. He wasn't around much. He lived in a small town. But when he died, a lot of people came to the funeral. Way more than expected. Turns out he'd spent a lot of his time volunteering, visiting with old folks, talking with people in hospice, the food pantry, etc. etc. He never told anyone. When he died, all the people from these different volunteer organizations showed up along with the people he'd helped. Line was around the block to the funeral. That's the way I would like my own funeral to be. Motivation for me to do some more good in the world. When I was working as a summer job in our local hospital, I got paged to a room by a patient. Usually what they wanted for me to do is shift their position or get them some water or something similar. This time the old lady asked me to come to her and take her hand. She told me I don't want to die alone. I assured her that she would not die alone. After a few silent moments of her just staring at me smiling, she said thank you, goodbye, and then she died. One day I was on my way to a job interview when I saw a man crawling down the side of the road. About 100 yards away, I saw a car crashed into a tree and assumed that this man had been in that car. So I pulled over, got out of the car, and talked to the guy to make sure he was alright. He said he was, but clearly he wasn't. His injuries weren't life-threatening by any means, but he was scratched, bruised, disoriented, and old. I offered to take him to the hospital, but he wouldn't have it. He didn't have the money, he said, and with a little more prodding eventually released that his niece is a nurse, and she could get him cleaned up. I asked him where she lived. It was about a 45-minute drive. I told him to get in my car, and I drove him there. Sure enough, his niece cleaned him up, and after some rest, he was okay. I missed my job interview. I never told anyone why I didn't get the job. I hope you finally found a better job later on. I was day tripping to Vancouver from Seattle and stopped in for lunch at a little cafe. From my window I saw a young teenage girl out in the cold, squatted down in a closed up business's doorway, holding a small bundle in her arms. She was panhandling. People were mostly walking by ignoring her. She looked just broken. I finished up my meal and went outside, went through my wallet and thought I'd give her $5 for some food. I got up to her and she was sobbing. She looked like she was 14-15, and that bundle in her arms was a baby wrapped up. I felt like I just got punched in the chest. She looked up, putting on a game face, and asked for any change. I asked her if she's like some lunch. Right next door was a small Quick Trip type grocery store. I got a can of formula for the baby, very young, maybe 2-3 months old, and took her back to the cafe, though I'd just eaten. She was very thankful. Got a burger and just inhaled it. Got her some pie and ice cream. She opened up and we talked. She was 15. Got pregnant. Parents were angry and she was fighting with them. She ran away. She's been gone almost 1 full year. I asked her if she's like to go home and she got silent. I coaxed her. She said her parents wouldn't want her back. I coaxed further. She admitted she stole $5,000 in cash from her dad. Turns out $5,000 doesn't last long at all, and the streets are tough on a 15-year-old. Very tough. She did want to go back, but she was afraid no one wanted her back after what she did. We talked more. I wanted her to use my phone to call home, but she wouldn't. I told her I'd call and see if her folks wanted to talk to her. She hesitated and gave bad excuses, but eventually agreed. She dialed the number and I took the phone. Her mom picked up and I said hello. Awkwardly introduced myself and said her daughter would like to speak to her. Silence, and I heard crying. Gave the phone to the girl and she was just quiet listening to her mom cry, and then said hello, and she cried. They talked. She gave the phone back to me. I talked to her mom some more. I drove her down to the bus station and bought her a bus ticket home. Gave her $100 cash for incidentals and some formula, diapers, wipes, snacks for the road. Got to the bus and she just cried, saying thank you over and over. I gave her a kiss on the forehead and a hug. Kissed her baby, and she got on the bus. I get a Christmas card every year from her. She's 21 now and in college. Her name is Michaela and her baby was Joe. I've never really told anyone about this. I just feel good knowing I did something good in this world. Maybe it'll make up for the things I've effed up. Whoa man, I sincerely hope I run into you when I screw thing up. 2 years ago, I was walking into my local gym for my workout through the parking lot. As I approached, I noticed a car that had pulled halfway out of its parking space. Behind the wheel was a man in his mid-60s, evidently on his way to or from his workout. He was slumped over the wheel, clutching his chest. I knocked on the window and got no response. I opened the door and asked him if he needed help. He looked up at me, pale as a ghost, and mumbled, "I can't feel my arm. I think I'm having a heart attack." I ran into the gym and went to the front desk, told them the situation and begged them to call 911 and get an ambulance immediately. The 3 people behind the desk fumbled through some corporate policy manual, attempted to call the gym manager, conferred with one another, and basically did everything and anything but pick up the dang phone and dial for help. I pretty quickly realized that these people weren't going to do anything helpful in time. I ran back out to the man in the car who was, if anything, even paler than before and was unable to verbalize. So, as gently but quickly as I could, I pushed him into the passenger seat, put his car in gear, and drove as fast as I could to the nearest hospital, which fortunately I knew the location of, running most every red light in the process, and also getting pursued by a police car, in front of whom I'd run several lights. I pulled into the air at the hospital and ran in, telling the first nurse I saw that I had a man in the car undergoing a cardiac arrest. The staff rushed out with a gurney and transferred the man to it, while supplying oxygen and checking his vitals, and wheeled him inside with great haste. About this time, the police officer rolled up and I explained the situation. Fortunately, he let me off. Unfortunately, I was too dumb to ask for a ride back to the gym, where I'd left my own car. So, I walked the 5 miles back, worked out, and drove home. About 8 weeks later, I was riding the recumbent bike in the cardio room when someone tapped me on the shoulder. I didn't recognize the person. Turns out it was the man from earlier, but a lot healthier looking. He told me his name was Lester, and he said, "You're the guy who took me to the hospital." The doctor told me if I'd arrived a few minutes later, I'd probably have been dead. "You saved my life. I just wanted to say thank you." So, that made feel pretty nice. Other than the police pursuing me at the time, I never told anyone about this. A couple of years ago, I was working late at Dublin Airport. Nothing much to do. I had to wait till the last plane came down, usually 2 or 3 in the morning. I had a radio with me, so I was just walking around, killing time. Many people sleep in the airport overnight rather than travel there in the morning for early bird flights. Among these, I saw 2 Spanish girls, teenagers, one of them in obvious distress with tears trickling down her cheeks. I asked what was wrong. Between their broken English and my even worse Spanish, we established that the crying girl had a painful kidney infection. When I explained that she would not be allowed to fly because she was obviously in need of medical treatment, the trickle of tears became a flow. I advised her to get a taxi to the hospital and then taxi back and she'd be in time for her 6:25 flight. Her problem? No cash. I wasn't exactly flush myself. However, I arranged a lift for them both to the hospital, made sure that their luggage was secured and gave them enough for the taxi back from the hospital. I hope it worked out for them. But how would they pay for her medical? Oh wait, gotcha. When I got my settlement check for getting my finger cut off at work, I kept $2,000 and put the rest in the bank. That night after dinner and drinks, I was coming home and saw a homeless man, 25-30, that I've seen several times before, posted up against a wall near the intersection shivering in the cold. Since there were 3 hotels at that intersection, I stopped, rented a room for a week on my debit card, then took the key out of the envelope, replaced it with $1,700 and walked over to the gentleman to hand him the key and cash. No bullshitting. I saw him a month or so later working at a gas station. Clean, shaved and nice hair. I'm not sure if he recognized me, but I'm glad because I recognized him and he appeared to be happy and doing well, which said enough. I haven't seen him in several years, but I like to think he's back on his feet. Maybe a family, a house, whatever really, but just doing well. To give that much money is amazing. I don't think that I would be able to do it. This one is cheating a little, because it wasn't actually me, but it has inspired me to do a lot more selfless things in my life. When I was 14 or so, I went with my dad to Target. He was doing some general Christmas shopping but also had a list from an impoverished inner city family. It was handwritten notes from each of 4 children in the family. They were instructed by the charity running the program to keep their requests reasonable. But my dad read everyone and went way overboard. One kid asked for a video game for a previous gen system. My dad bought him a PS2, which was new at the time, and a bunch of games. One of the daughters asked for a modest desk to do her schoolwork on. He bought her a really cool one and threw in every kind of school supply she could possibly need. And so on for the other 2 kids. He ended up spending a lot of money on this family. When he saw how jealous I was of the PS2, I'd really been wanting one badly. He looked at me and said, "I want you to stop and really think about who this is going to and what their life is probably like and what it will feel like for them to open this on Christmas. If you do that and still want it, I'll give it to you instead." And so that's the story of how I got my rad new PS2. Just kidding. It's how I learned about the joy of giving and that my dad's a pretty cool guy. A guilty conscience is temporary. A PS2 lasts forever. I used to pick up pretty much any hitchhiker I saw. I would even pick up people at the bus stop. It just seemed to me that since I had a car and some free time that it was no big deal to help someone out. I never asked for money or anything like that. It was nice to see the people smile. One day I pick up a guy about my age. I was 19 at the time, and he was very thankful that I did. He was telling me about all the stuff he had to do that day and he knew that he would only get 2 or 3 things done because the buses. I had to be at work soon, so I asked him if he knew how to drive standard. He looked at me funny and said yes. I pulled into my work and told him to be back here in 12 hours. I gave him $20 for gas and said bye. The guys at work asked me who he was, but I didn't even remember his name from the short time we rode together. They urged me to call the cops, but I told them the kid would be back. After my shift ended, my car was there. The kid had the biggest smile on his face, and as I drove him home he told me how he was able to get everything done and that I had saved him at least a full day of running around. I saw him from time to time after that. It was nice to hear that because I helped him out, he would go out of his way to help others out. Wow, you have faith in humanity. I envy you, sir. I've been lucky and have had the opportunity to do different things in my life that allowed me to meet people that I could support. No questions asked, but there's one thing that always sticks out to me above all the other things that would seem like a lot bigger deal on paper. I ran a summer long day camp for kids in a neighborhood that's always labeled as troubled, violence ridden, etc. etc. You know the type. The media loves it. There was this one 8-year-old boy who drove me up the wall. Not a day would go by when he wouldn't steal, or hit, kick, punch, bite, or be verbally abusive to myself, my team and other kids. Not a day went by where I didn't have to send him home early, but every morning he was the first kid to arrive, sometimes showing up an hour early. So every morning I would hug him, look him in the eyes and say, "I'm so glad you're here today." Let me tell you, most days, my emotions did not line up with what I was saying. I mean, this kid caused me so much grief, but every day I did it. Every day I sent him home early because of his behavior, and every morning I welcomed him back without question. That was one of the hardest, nicest things I've ever done. But I think about that kid every day. I learned more about his family life. It was heck. Absolute heck. So I hope that for a couple hours he felt like someone wanted him around. You probably did more for him than you'll ever really realize. His showing up early every day is a sure testament to that. I was driving back from dinner with some family and I saw a homeless man holding a sign which read "Need dog food." I got home and took a trip to the grocery store and bought at least $20 or so worth of dog food and drinks for the dog owner. I went back to the intersection and walked over with 30 pounds of food and drinks for the dogs and owner. I walked past the 20 cars waiting for the light to turn green and wondered if anyone would have helped him more than just give him change. As I got closer, his 2 dogs started to cry and whine. They had no food and didn't seem like they would make it past winter. I gave him the dog food and drinks and he thanked me. A friend of mine gave dog food to a dude with a similar sign. He basically said, "Frick you," when she gave it to him and asked for cash. About 6-7 years ago, my GF at the time and I were vacationing in Chicago. It was our last night, so we hit a local bar and were just hanging out drinking $12 martinis. This homeless guy walks in and comes over to us with a handful of postcards and offers them to us. I didn't need them, so I give him $5 for 2. He refuses. I try to give him $10 and he still refuses, so I ask him what he wants. He tells me that he is just hungry and wants something to eat. The bartender had to go all the way around to come up to the guy. The homeless guy orders a cheeseburger. The bartender was clearly distraught and asked the guy if he had any money. I jumped in and said it was on me. I ordered a second cheeseburger and 2 orders of fries to go with it. We sat and talked to him while his food was being made. Just a normal guy that lost his job and then his hope. I felt so terrible spending a couple $100 in a bar while this guy could do so much with it. When his food came out, he profusely thanked me. I shoved all the cash I had into his hand and awkwardly told him good luck. The bartender turned out to be the owner. He came back around, told me that he had never seen anyone do something like that before. I offered up some feeble reply on how it just seemed right at the time and that we were leaving because I spent the last of my drinking money. He wouldn't let us go. He gave us round after round on the house. Closing time came soon after and we started heading to the door and he stopped us again. He was dating one of the waitresses and wanted to take us out to the late night bar. We hung out in the locked up bar with her while he did some paperwork. We played darts and drank before staggering back to our hotel. I can't remember the homeless guy's face, what he was wearing, but I still have that postcard of the Sears Tower. I work as a meat clerk at a major natural foods chain. Every week there's an old man that comes into my store. His name is Sid. Sid is a picky old man that forgets things. He often calls me George. My name is Robert. He gives the clerks a hard time, asking for special things, and being an overall curmudgeon. No one wants to help him, but I was nice to him one day and ever since that day, he comes in asking if George is around. One day while I was helping him, he told me that he had lost his wife several years back and that he forgets things and that it's generally lousy being old. No secret there, but he's lonely and I felt bad for him. I often give him special service that takes a great deal of time. It can be a pain in the butt at times, and my co-workers sometimes give me guff for it. This past week I was helping Sid when he asked me to take his hand. He firmly grabbed it, looked me dead in the eye and said, "Thank you for being my friend." I started to well up and thanked him for being my friend, telling him that he was a nice man. It's not too much that I'm doing something incredibly nice for Sid, or even that it's the nicest thing I've ever done. It's simple stuff. It sounds cheesy, but the impact of simple actions can make a huge difference to some people. I honestly had no idea that what I was doing was so important to him. I'm the oldest kid and played mediator when I was home for summer break while my parents screamed out their differences problems. They would scream their frustrations at me and I, half bawling, translated it to the other side and called out their bulls they were putting themselves through. My grandparents, aunts, uncles, family friends, and brothers and sister, still in elementary and high school, don't know I did it, but I am 100% positive from the conversations with my mother that I saved their marriage. She had a bag packed to up and leave. I think this is my greatest accomplishment ever. A long while back I was driving through Costa Mesa and I saw this hitchhiker on the side of the road. I don't normally stop for hitchhikers, but something about this guy made me want to stop. As it turns out, he was a German student who had flown to Buenos Aires, Argentina, and hitchhiked all the way up from there. He was completely out of money and only had about 100 miles left to go till he could hook up with some relatives. I couldn't give him the ride all the way up there, but I did drive him to the Greyhound station in Santa Ana and bought him a ticket to his destination. What an awesome adventure for him. I was sitting in a lecture hall one morning when the guy in front of me had a full-on tonic-clonic seizure. The prof froze, so I got out of my seat and called for an ambulance. I knew the guy, but not particularly well, so they wouldn't let me ride with him to the hospital. I tracked him down a couple hours later and hung out with him at the hospital. We didn't say a whole lot and, frankly, didn't have to. He just needed someone to be there with him. I dunno. Compared to a lot of the other people, Wartoad in particular, my story isn't going to seem so hot, but here goes. It was 2007, I think. I was going to see Weezer. Not sure who else was there. I went to the show by myself as I don't have anyone to get out to shows with these days. And I saw a younger couple, probably in their older teens. They were a really cute couple. It struck a chord with me for some reason. And they were really excited to be there. Fast forward to doors opening. I make my way to the general admission line. In case anyone doesn't know, this is the line to get on the floor in most cases, as opposed to the seats, and I'm standing right behind these two. The boyfriend goes through first, ticket is scanned and he goes through. Girlfriend is next, only apparently she has a seated ticket. Pretty rough for them because obviously the boyfriend has already scanned his ticket, so it's either they see the show separate or they go home. They looked pretty bummed. It was an easy decision for me to trade my floor ticket for the seated ticket, and getting the two in together made up for my not being on the floor. They seemed quite happy, and it made my day. That's really nice. There's nothing quite like being a love-struck teenager who feels like the whole world is on your side. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.